This is Gilbert Andrew Garcia. Listen to my radio show, A Tip from Gilbert. Talk, inspiration, and prayer every Monday from 11 a.m. till noon on Houston's gospel leader, KWWJ. 1360 AM and streaming live on kwwj.org. Listen on the legendary KYOK 1140 AM and streaming live on kyokradio.org. KCOH 1230 AM, The Source. On Sand Geek Radio 95.1 FM 1460 AM. And Aliento Radio 101.7 FM and 1540 AM. Call in at 832-570-8075 and follow me on social media. See you then. All right, Houston, this is Gilbert Garcia with another episode of A Tip from Gilbert or A Tip from Me. So here you go. We have really one of my favorite guests. We've had him on before because he's really the closest thing to a Renaissance man that I know. And that's Mr. Chris Tomlinson, who is a columnist, not just here at Houston, but I think he's syndicated in other cities. Chris, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me back, Gilbert.
Well, great to have you. And before we go into it, a couple of sort of news things. First of all, we talk a lot about my sister-in-law, Tanya Pena. And, of course, we all know that we've been following her story a little bit as she's gotten cancer. And it's interesting because, you know, I think, Chris, when someone is like that, going through cancer, something so remarkable and scary, she's got the most incredible disposition. She's like the happiest person. And she's like holy somehow because I think I would be mad at the Lord. I think I'd be screaming, crying. I think I'd go into depression. Well, the long story short, Houston, is it has spread, and we just got that news. So we're going to say a prayer for Tanya. Heavenly Father, in your compassion, please bring healing and recovery to Tanya. Touch them with your healing hand and restore their strength. Ease their pain and mend what is broken. Surround them with your peace and comfort in this time of illness. Grant them patience and recovery and faith in your loving care. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. So that's for Tanya. It's just amazing, her outlook. What an inspiration she is to me. And then that's on one side. The other side is, I guess there was another assassination attempt on former President Trump. I haven't read all the details, Houston, but it seems that there was another attempt. It was on the golf course. Part of me thinks, you know, how can you ever really protect someone on a golf course? It doesn't seem even normal that you could even do such a thing unless the whole place is somehow fenced. I mean, I don't know. It seems to me maybe he ought to play less golf. I mean, right, Chris? I mean, really think about. I mean, I really need it, but look, violence is never the answer. So everyone listening, whether you're for him, and everybody knows where I stand, but violence is not the way out. Let's beat him at the polls. That's the way to do it right, not violence.
That's correct.
So speaking of violence, not to say we want to talk about violence, because we're here to talk about, I really have enjoyed all your stories on ERCOT and Centerpoint and everything else. But before we do that, I want to make sure people realize you're such an award-winning columnist, and you've had such an extraordinary background. Just go through a little bit about all the places where you've been there seeing conflict. I mean, you've really been at the front lines, and that's not a metaphor. You've been on the front lines. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I was a soldier. I joined the Army when I was 17 years old, got out when I was 25, went to college, and decided I wanted to be a writer. And the only reliable pay for writing then back then and even today was working in journalism. So I went to South Africa and ended up working for a Japanese newspaper. Wow. Covering the end of apartheid in 1993, 1994. I was lucky enough to meet Nelson Mandela and to cover his election and his inaugural speech. And in Pretoria, and from there,
Well, stop for a second.
Yeah.
You know, I remember when I was young, I must have been in high school, and there was a whole movement in colleges about shanty towns on colleges.
Mhm.
Kind of like today, there's stuff related to the whole Middle East
to
conflict.
Gaza. Yeah.
Remember, it was all about apartheid. And remember the Sullivan Principles, and then, all the effort to boycott certain businesses doing businesses in South Africa. And then I think it was part of the pressure that worked. But I will never forget, my brother was in college, and I was in high school, and he brought home a friend, that not a romantic friend, but a female friend, and she was from South Africa. And I remember how interesting it was for me to hear her try to defend apartheid. And she was trying to do it in such a sort of an intellectual way. And we could never get past that, my feelings that it was just morally, wrong, that it was just terribly wrong. But she was trying to go through the history of the Afrikaans and how they settled things, and she was trying to talk about things like hygiene and so forth. And it was just very interesting, Chris, what her mindset was. And we were just two ships in the night. We just could not even bridge it, as I was talking about. But how would you feel if it was you? These are people, and you're treating them like they're not. Did you see a lot of that when you were there?
Oh, of course.
Of
course.
what was it like?
I think, one of the things I heard most often from defenders of apartheid was that, our blacks are not like your blacks.
Mm-hmm.
A black South African is not like a black American. And there was a lot of intellectual gymnastics
Mm-hmm.
to try to justify their oppression. But, it all comes down to this concept of, settler colonialism.
Mm-hmm.
This was a group of Dutch colonialists who went to South Africa. And in that particular colonial experience, the idea was to go and stay, not just extract the natural resources, but to go and start a new nation. And of course, that requires displacement. And it's much of the same dynamic I think you're seeing in the Middle East today when we talk about the Palestinians and the Israelis, and who owns what land, who's entitled to it, whose sense of history
Mm-hmm.
should come first. So, yeah, but, you're right. At the end of the day, when we want to defeat an enemy or a perceived enemy, we turn them into someone else, something different, not
Mm-hmm.
human, not like us, that they are this or that, and therefore not like us. And then through that process, we can find ways to justify all kinds of horrible behavior.
Well, that's kind of like when you hear things like, and I just couldn't believe what I was hearing on this recent presidential debate. This whole concept of, and they're eating dogs. I mean, we're going down to, when there's so many issues in this country, there's so many things that need attention that we should be talking about. And the whole thing we were talking about is some group of people that who knows if it's real or not. It doesn't appear to be real, in some city that they're eating cats and dogs.
Well,
it's just,
we know it came from a neo-Nazi propagandist in Ohio.
Is that
That's where the story came from. And honestly, it's the same story we used to hear about Chinese people in Chinese restaurants back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, that, you shouldn't go to a Chinese restaurant because they eat cats. It is an idea that another group of people who don't look like you are going to eat your pets and take your home. It's the oldest form of fascism. It predates Mussolini and Hitler. It goes back to the beginning of time. It's this idea of let's dehumanize another group of people so that we can try to build a unity among ourselves. It's the worst kind of politics, and it's one that we need to reject.
It's awful. It really is awful. It's so far-fetched. you want to say it's funny, but because some people really believe it, it's not. It's very serious because some people really believe it. But I just couldn't believe it. Let's go back. So South Africa, extraordinary time you were there. Then what?
Then I spent a brief period in Nairobi, Kenya, working for the same Japanese paper, and then I went to Rwanda right after the genocide to report on the recovery there. I was based in Kigali for 2.5 years, covered a coup in Burundi, the overthrow of Mobutu Sese Seko in Zaire, what we now call the Democratic Republic of Congo. Did some work in Uganda, Tanzania. And then that was kind of the beginning of my career as a war correspondent, which was my primary job for about 20 years before I joined the Chronicle.
Wow. I mean, now the funny thing is you did all those things. And now writing for the Chronicle must be sort of like, well, but this is easy, right? I mean, there's no bullets flying around.
Writing is never easy, Gilbert. Writing is never easy.
But there's no bullets coming around. There's just, I mean, really think about it. I mean, it's a real stable situation compared to these places you've been.
Well, I mean, if you ever check out the comments section on my social media posts, you'd think I was under fire.
Yeah.
No, it's different. I mean, I remember being, 44 years old in Mosul, trying to keep up with some 19-year-old infantrymen walking patrol and getting into firefights and just thinking, I'm too old for this. Yeah. And it's also not fair to the soldiers I was traveling with that, they had to slow down to let me keep up. So yeah, it was a conscious decision, but I think, if you're doing good journalism, you're gonna provoke people in power, and people in power have ways of lashing out at you.
Well, thank goodness the Chronicle lets you be you. I mean, to really let you have because you can write your article, your column. How many days is a week now?
I write 2 columns a week.
Yep.
We post them online on Tuesday and Friday. They appear in print on Wednesday and Sunday. I also have a newsletter called Tomlinson's Take, which is for subscribers only. Yep. And that goes directly to your inbox.
And I get that. It's fantastic. Hold that thought. We have a caller already. Is there a Patricia on the line?
Hi, yes, this is Patricia.
Well, Patricia, you have me, Gilbert Garcia, and Mr. Chris Tomlinson of the Houston Chronicle. What do you have for us today?
Well, I wanted to, first of all, thank Mr. Tomlinson for, holding Houston accountable, and just, stating the facts and what's going on. We really need someone that's a, truth teller out there and looking out for the city and the community, because, we don't have anybody looking out for us. I feel like we don't. And,
No, you go. Keep going. Then I'm going to say something.
Yeah. So I just want to thank him for covering all these topics, and especially like for the storm and, how everybody in the city felt horrible afterward. And, the aftermath of everything was just very negative, and it put a bad taste in my mouth. It really made me rethink about staying here in Houston.
Wow. You know what? I have a feeling there's a lot of people who feel like you do, because it seems like every 5 years, certain parts of town go through flooding, windstorm, they can't get insurance, you name it, they live it. But yeah. Somehow what you said brought something to my mind, which is in this whole culture now of fake news. And I mean, you can read such silly, crazy things. I don't know how I get on some of these right-wing lists, but I'm on some now, and I get these emails. Of course, I try to unsubscribe and that, but it seems to morph into sort of a different UIL address. And there's such bizarre stories about Kamala and all these kinds of things. It's just, I can see where people don't know where do I turn to anymore. Thank goodness we have people like you, Chris, that, you're going to tell it straight. I sure hope you don't leave Houston and give us more, another chance, because it's a wonderful place. But I certainly understand and can sympathize with all the, stuff you're kind of referring to. Chris, what do you think?
Well, thank you for the compliments, Patricia. It's why we do what we do, and I think that's, as journalists, and to your point about fake news, this is the whole point. Is who is paying for this information, right? I get the Blaze Media emails, and and that's you follow the money and you realize it's some right-wing elements who are trying to shape the conversation and shape how we feel about the country and how we see the world. If you want to trace back the money that pays my salary, it's subscribers.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit of advertising. Advertising's going away, which is why your subscription rates are going up for the paper, is because the advertising business. Google kind of took that away from us. So, my salary comes from the people of Houston who subscribe to the paper. My duty is to help you understand your world better and make smart decisions that will lead to you having a better life. And that's frankly all me and my colleagues care about at the Chronicle. Whether or not Kamala Harris or Donald Trump is president really is not going to make a difference to us financially. It will for the people who are financing these fake news sites. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it.
Right. Well, Patricia, we thank you for calling in, and hopefully you continue to listen to the show.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Y'all have a great day.
You too. I wonder, Chris, you've seen so many conflicts and things around the world. Did you ever think you'd see something like what happened here in January a couple of years ago, where people would storm the Capitol? Did you ever think you'd see that here in America?
I'm sad to say, no, I was not surprised.
Wow.
And maybe that's because I have covered 9 full-on wars in about 4 countries that had civil unrest, similar to what we saw in Washington. It's because of the quality of our politics. We have very low quality political discourse right now. And I trace that back to Newt Gingrich in 1992. And I think, there's some argument to be made that Donald Trump is the logical conclusion of Reagan's approach, the way he would vilify his political opponents. The whole point of having political parties is to have a debate and to find compromise. And when you have politicians who only want to defeat the other, that they don't want to compromise, they don't want to negotiate, it's their way or the highway, then if you say that often enough and long enough, then people are attacking the Capitol to prevent the peaceful transition of power to a duly elected political party.
Well, when you look at the parallels of what happened here to what's happened at these other places, are we in the 7th inning of whatever we're going through here in America, or the 9th inning, or we are just on the 2nd inning, the front end of all this discourse and all this trouble?
I mean, historically, when you look back through American history, we have these periods of nationalistic uprising. I've written 2 books about Texas history. Right. And, the most recent was the 1920s with the rise of the Ku Klux Klan in Texas. At one point, the governor was a member of the Klan. The mayor of Dallas was a member of the Klan. There was a U.S. senator from Texas. They were all Klan members. The Klan had 100,000 members show up at the State Fair of Texas in 1926. I'm sorry, 1926. It's a thing, and we go through these upheavals, and I frankly think we're on the backside of it. I think, if Donald Trump loses this election, we will have succeeded in passing through this period. And, in another 40 or 50 years, we'll go through it again. It's just, I think, part of the political cycle. But I'm optimistic that it's going to end soon.
Well, I hope you are right for the country's sake, and the world's sake, because we are the leaders in democracy, or we'd like to think we are. For the whole world's sake. We have another call. Actually, we have 2 callers. Linda, are you there, Linda?
Yes, I'm here.
Linda, you got me, Gilbert Garcia, and Chris Tomlinson from the Houston Chronicle. What do you got for us today?
And Gilbert, do I love you? Of course you know I love you. But of course, I have been waiting since I heard that Mr. Tomlinson, the journalist, was coming on to the show. And I want you to know I've been structuring everything waiting to make certain that I got it. And Mr. Tomlinson, I don't only enjoy your columns, my goodness, this is where I'm speechless. But before you point your typewriter or your keyboard at what's happening in the public school system, which I can't wait for you to begin to write on, what about CenterPoint Energy? Why don't they give out? Why isn't CenterPoint doing what Houston Lighting and Power did years past? Power surges, what we were talking about at the Y, the Central Y, me and a bunch of old women, with power surges. They're not paying for power surge. They had that stupid community come get together. They flashed at me a charity that didn't throw 2 bricks on top of one another in Haiti after collecting all that money, and said, well, here, if you need help with food, go here. No, you're supposed to replace my food. That's what Houston Lighting and Power used to do. But CenterPoint is just, my goodness, they're running away. They're not even giving the natives a watermelon after we pick the whole field.
Linda, thank you so much. And I couldn't agree with you more. This is the conservative economic philosophy, is that you hand everything over to a private company. You don't regulate them. You don't put rules on them, and you just kind of cross your fingers and hope they do the right thing. We've seen this failure time and time again. CenterPoint is clearly far more interested in returning profits to their shareholders than they are taking care of the people in Houston. Houston Power and Light was much more accountable to the city. This legislature had not stripped the city of its power to control HP&L's decisions. It was only after the deregulation of the electricity markets in 1998, the law was passed 1998, the deregulation began in 2000. But it's time, that we demand that the city of Houston, the Public Utility Commission, put the people of Houston first and not the shareholders of CenterPoint. They have that power. They can do it if they want to. And when CenterPoint has to face the public hearing here in Houston on October 5th, we'll see whether or not our lawmakers are up to it.
And, Linda, when you hear the mayor say, we got to hold him accountable, it's really one thing. It's the board of directors. They're the ones that technically are the ones running that company. And I was looking at the names, and it's a who's of political insiders. It's a who's who of people that are getting paid anywhere from $250,000 to $450,000 a year to essentially do whatever the management wants to do. That's how I see it, Linda. What do you think?
Well, board of directors or board of trustees, perhaps it's under a government entity. They're not supposed to be paid. I've sat on the board of Houston Federation of Teachers. I've sat on the board of HBAD, and board members don't get paid. Of course, that's why this non-certified mess that came in from Colorado and sent them $49 million. He calls it board of managers. What I don't like is the political implication. How did Governor Abbott get money to go through? He's not that rich a young boy. Go through the hinterlands and coax those voters out of what would have been their job money, all the rest of it, unless CenterPoint had funded it. A man who makes $240 million a year. That's a drop in the bucket. You're not earning that much there. He can float a few $1,000s to this city and that city, and he turns over the vote. That's what I look at. The board of trustees, yeah, but where the campaign contributions, where is this money going? How did he get this money?
It's also interesting, and we're going to talk a lot here, so you've already brought it up to us, which is if you look, it's like a closed system. So you have the legislature, which is sort of doing laws related to CenterPoint. And then, of course, they're the same ones that will say, oh, CenterPoint didn't do a good job, but they're the same ones that are going out to whatever their vacation place is or hunting lodge.
Yeah,
and they're the pond. And they're also the same ones that are getting lots of campaign contributions. It's just terrible, Chris. How are we going to get away from this?
Well, let's not forget that while while Mayor Whitmire was in the state Senate, he voted for these laws that took away the city's ability to control Centerpoint and have authority over Centerpoint. We have to remember that Centerpoint employed his daughter for many years as a lobbyist. Democrat and Republican legislators both hung out at the Pond, the luxury resort that Centerpoint owns, on the San Jacinto Bay. So, it's dirty, self-dealing politics. And it's why you need to subscribe to your paper. So there'll be someone like us out there doing it. And I appreciate you. I know you do, Linda.
And
I didn't doubt that you did.
I get a paper. It goes down the block. Mr. Lewis is 85. He reads it first, and then I get it. So we subscribe.
Well,
$600-800 water bills. They're beating us up because you just don't have time for all of this. I feel like muley graves and grapes of wrath. Who do I shoot?
Yeah. So please listen to the show. We got a lot more to talk about because I would like Chris to go back to how did this start? I want to go back to really the formation of ERCOT and the whole PUC and regulations. So we're going to go through all that, but thank you so much for calling.
And one thing, please keep us abreast on the October 5th. I've got to make that. I will not go out and picket against Superintendent Miles, just for you. Okay.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know we have another caller. Let's take this real quick, Chris. Was there another caller? Who was it? I didn't see the name. Isidro. Isidro, are you there? Isidro and Samantha. Let's do Isidro first. Isidro,
Mayor.
can you hear? Isidro, how are you, my friend?
How's my mayor doing?
Well, I'm doing well. I thank you for saying that. We're having a show here. I'm with Chris Tomlinson, who of course has an extraordinary background when you think about his relatives and all their role they played in slavery and the Texas Republic. And of course, we learned and heard a lot about his coverage in so many different war zones. And we're really talking about Centerpoint. But what do you got for us there?
Well, happy Independence Day.
Amen.
Today is a very important day that actually has a direct effect on the United States of America, because it is during those times that a lot of countries in North America and South America that started to emulate what the United States had done in getting their independence in 1776. But today, in 1810, Presidente Miguel Hidalgo declared independence against Spain, and it started the revolution for its independence that was finally obtained in 1824. But it is that call for self-governance so that we determine what the future of our families are and not determined by people that are thousands of miles away. And that spread throughout South America, and Mexico and Texas itself started to seek independence also.
Well, Isidro, one of the, I didn't, growing up in Texas, I didn't learn very much about the history of the Mexican independence movement. I'm of an age that just wasn't taught in schools. And I learned so much about it when I was researching my books. I just want to urge all the listeners out there, if you don't know the story of Father Hidalgo and the fight for independence in Mexico, and their very early battle to ban slavery across North America and in their territories, please check it out.
Yes, and it's important to get the right perspective and a complete perspective, because the Battle of the Alamo is hardly ever referred to as a battle against slavery, but it was.
Oh, I wrote a book about it called "Forget the Alamo." That's my book I was referring to.
Yes, and in essence, Mexico was totally against slavery, and General Santana, one of the things that he said when the siege came, he gave an order to not kill children, females, and slaves that were inside the Alamo, and that's how Joe Travis, slave of the famous Travis, William B. Travis, how he was able to tell the story because he survived the Alamo.
Wow, what great history! Everyone should know. You're right. Everyone should know. Isidro, what else do you got? What do you think about some of the stuff related to Centerpoint? Did you lose your power?
Yes.
How long?
Must have been 4 days.
4 days?
Yes.
I mean, it's amazing how we just take 4 days. Like, well, it was only 4 days. I mean, think about that. I mean, but I know some people didn't have power for like 2 weeks.
Yes.
I mean, that's unbelievable.
Most of my family here, we have 12 homes within a stone's throw away, a family, and some went the whole 2 weeks.
Wow.
Without power, and of course we all help each other.
Amen for that. Do you have any question there for Chris?
No, keep up the fight. It's a good fight, and the right thing needs to be done, and we should have control of those who govern us, and those who govern us. I mean, it's usually just the opposite. They dictate to us, like we're the ones that are being governed, but they're supposed to be there to serve.
Well, Isidro, thank you so much for calling in. And I'm just looking at Hannah Cisneros. I see your email to us. Keep talking about Centerpoint because my electric bill is just too high this month. I appreciate you, Hannah, and I saw a bunch of other ones there. But I know we have one more call, and then let's get to Centerpoint. What was that last one? Was it a Samantha I thought I saw? Hold on. Samantha, are you there?
Samantha? Yeah, okay, let me transfer you to Gilbert. One moment.
There's a good one.
Thank you, Alejandro.
Yeah, that's a great one. Is there, Samantha, are you there? Samantha.
Hi there.
Hey, you got me, Gilbert Garcia, and Mr. Chris Tomlinson of the Houston Chronicle. What do you have for us today? We're kind of talking about all kinds of things, but we're going to be talking more about the whole Centerpoint fiasco. What do you got for us?
Hi, Gilbert. Hi, Chris.
Hello.
I was just listening in, and I wanted to share my story. So me, like many others, I lost power for 4 days, and I was lucky, and my family was lucky enough to be able to stay with other family. But my sister, on the other hand, she didn't have power for over a week, and she stayed at her house because she has pets. She has 2 dogs. And she didn't want to take her dogs to someone else's house and put that burden on them. So I just know, like, Houston was hurting so much. It's like, what is Centerpoint going to do about that? I mean, I know a lot of people, they might have gotten money from FEMA and whatnot, but, that I know a lot of us are hurting over that. And then thankfully, this hurricane, was it Hurricane Francine? It didn't hit us. It hit Louisiana, but I don't know if anyone else got a message from Centerpoint. I got a message on my phone saying, be in preparation for the hurricane. And we were like, no.
Well, we appreciate the call there, Samantha. And so, so you were out 4 days. I remember another storm. I don't remember exactly which one it was now. Here in Houston, we just feel like it's normal to have them all the time. And I had my kids, so they were all with me, and my wife. And the first night, Samantha, it was like kind of a fun thing for the family because there we were all on couches in the den and all there. We had candles everywhere. And then reality set in pretty quick because our house became an oven. I mean, it was hotter than hot, and the coolness wore out in the first night. And then my family abandoned me, and they went to Austin or something, and I was stuck. I forgot why. And I mean, the cool factor lasted not even one whole night, and then it became a reality check, and we had to throw away everything out of our freezer, even in our fridge. It was terrible. And we found a friend of ours that had a generator, and it was just one generator, and there must have been about 50 people from the neighborhood all in this one room, because it was the only room that had air conditioning. So I know exactly what you're talking about, Samantha. Thank you so much for calling in.
Yeah, and Gilbert,
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, well, hold on. Chris has something. Go, Chris.
No, I not for Samantha, but you said something, Gilbert, that I think is really important for all Houstonians to remember, which is, yeah, we're going to have storms all the time. You know, they're predictable. There have been storms hitting the Buffalo Bayou and the Houston area ever from before Houston was built. Those storms will become more powerful. There will be more rain and more wind, and there will be more, and they will be more explosive thanks to climate change. None of this is a surprise. All of this is perfectly predictable, and that is why we have the outrage. Is because I think there was a mentality at Centerpoint that it was okay to have 4 days. People go without power for 4 days after a Category 1 hurricane. And that's no longer the expectation. And so we as Houstonians have to make sure that our politicians and Centerpoint understands that, you know, you have to prepare for climate change. You have to prepare for the Category 5 that is eventually going to hit this city.
Right.
We will have another Harvey, the fact that Beryl was a Category 1 and did so much damage, to me, was the most outrageous thing. And I hope it was a wake-up call, because, in America's fourth largest city, 4 days without power is unacceptable.
It is. Samantha, thank you for calling in.
Thank you, guys.
You're welcome. Let's go back to a second, because you had one of your articles, and I'm going to say something. I don't think you use this term, but if you know that the power lines are vulnerable, and you know that all the things are vulnerable, and you know that one of the things that causes the most damage are trees, why aren't you trimming or cutting down the trees? And you went through the mathematics of how many. I think you said there were 33 million trees in the whole region, et cetera. And you think about it, by the time they do one tree, by the time they get back to it, it's like 30 years later. I forgot the whole math, but it's kind of like, what are they thinking? Of course, you should be trimming down trees. So we have a park. We abut a park, and so there's a fence. And on the other side of our fence, because we're in a cul-de-sac, there's a big tree, and it's completely uprooted, and it's about to fall somewhere. And there's a power line right there. And of course, we called them. This is after the storm, and somebody called us back, and we went to look at it. There's not a problem. I'm like, what? How can that be? No, it's gonna fall. It's uprooted. The whole root system is exposed, and it's a big tree, and it's right on. I mean, it makes no sense. And somebody's got to. I mean, who's in charge of the tree cutting there? They need to do a better job. Tell me about what's your thoughts about that. I know it sounds silly, but it's not.
No, tree cutting is, the big problem.
Yep.
And I'm going to be fair to Centerpoint for a moment.
Okay.
Sometimes those power lines go over private property. And if that tree is private property and that pole is private property, they have to get the property owner's permission to go cut that tree. And property owners hate having their trees cut by the utilities, because utilities they're not doing this to make it look good.
Yeah.
They're just trimming the tree to keep the tree away from the lines. And so that is a problem. But you know what the bigger problem is? It's how we pay Centerpoint. Centerpoint gets a basic fee to do all of that maintenance, to trim those trees on existing lines and keep, in public right of ways. They don't make money off of that. What they do make money off of is when the power lines get knocked down and the poles get knocked down, they get a guaranteed 9.6% profit for putting that pole back up and restringing that lines. So they have the wrong incentive. We're not incentivizing them to prevent blackouts. They're financially incentivized to make money repairing from blackouts. You know, the $1.5 billion that CenterPoint spent to restore power after the derecho and after Beryl is going to be on your electricity bill. And you're going to be paying off that $1.5 billion for the next 30 years by paying an extra $2 or $3 on your electricity bill. And that doesn't come out of CenterPoint's pocket. That comes out of your pocket. However, if CenterPoint had trimmed those trees beforehand, that money would have come out of CenterPoint's pocket. Does that make sense?
It does.
So
it's why is it always the money? It's always the money.
Gilbert,
The money.
of all the people in the universe who should know it's always about money, it should be you.
What happened to just, I don't know, maybe I'm too idealistic. Do the right thing for the people. You know, it's outrageous. And there was the CEO, and I'm going to find it here. He's sitting there doing an interview, and he's all comfortable and everything. And if you look, the
thermostat is 70 degrees.
Yeah, no wonder he's all calm and cool. Where all of us are all sweating and we're all, you know, upset. Hold that thought, because I want to get this other caller in. Katie, was it Katie? Is there a Katie there? I want to find that board list. What do you got, Katie? You got me, Gilbert Garcia, and here he is. Look how cool and calm he looks. I don't know if you can zoom in on that, but I mean, you know, this is right there in the storm. He looks very calm and cool, Mr. Jason Wells. What do you got there for us, Katie?
Well, I just wanted to talk about, you know, how my family was affected by CenterPoint's, you know, inadequacy. I mean, my family, we didn't have power for almost a week.
Wow.
And it was because there were trees on the line that they just didn't come out and cut. And so when the trees fell and landed on the line, and then they caught on fire, and it was a whole big thing. But CenterPoint refused to come out. And like our neighborhood was the only like street in the whole area where like it was just dark.
Wow.
And we could see all our neighbors like on the next street over. They all had lights, but our street was just completely dark. And it was all because, you know, CenterPoint just couldn't maintain these trees correctly. And then when they did fall on the line, they didn't come out for, you know, a week to cut them down and fix the lines.
Wow. Well, but listen, Katie, we understand it is, it's just not acceptable. And I don't, you know, and I know there's whole things that they're saying, we're sorry. That's not enough when they're making millions of dollars a year. And I'm going to just read the list of those board of directors. This is who should be accountable, right? Because they technically are the ones that hire management. And I know Wendy Montoya. Wendy, it's just not right. What are you going to do about all this? Her public filing says that she made $324,000. Earl Cummings made $391,000. Christopher Franklin, Raquel Lewis, Thaddeus Malik. They're all making between $200,000, $300,000, $400,000. One person, Martin Nesbitt, made $457,000. This is a lot of money. And going back to, I think it was Linda who talked about, she didn't get paid when she sat on boards. And here these people are making tons of money. Ricky Raven, the guy made $133,000. That's the guy who wouldn't hire our firm to manage money at University of Houston, even though half our employees are from there. You know, it's just not right. But I mean, can we really turn to them, or are they so part ingrained in the system that you know, we're not going to get anywhere with them?
Well, I mean, they don't feel any sense of responsibility to the people of Houston. You know, their responsibility is to the people who own the stock, you know, CenterPoint stock. You know, they're interested in maximizing profits and shareholder returns. And, you know, the mission of keeping the lights on in Houston is really secondary. And this is what happens when you take a for-profit corporation and you put it in charge of a public good. You know, if you go to Austin, or you go to San Antonio, or you go out into the rural areas where there are cooperatives, those institutions report directly to the voters.
So let's go through that. How did we get here?
So when cities were being electrified, each city made a choice. They either hired a company to electrify the city, or the city decided to take charge of electrification. In Austin, it was Austin Energy, city-owned utility. The managing director reports directly to the city council and the mayor. It's CPS in San Antonio, same thing. But in Houston, we went with Houston Power and Light. And the regulations around Houston Power and Light was that, okay, you're a for-profit company. We're going to guarantee that you make a profit, but here are all the conditions that you have to operate under. These are our expectations for performance. And and if you don't meet these expectations, the Houston City Council can fire you and find another company to come take over. Well, in 1998, we decided to deregulate the electricity business. We broke up. Instead of having one company own the generation and the transmission lines and handle the customer bills, we broke that up into three things. So now there are generation companies, there are transmission companies, and there are retail electric providers for the Houston area.
And what was the thought process of breaking it up like that? What was the argument to do this?
Well, the companies, the private companies that were doing this work said, we can do it more efficient and we can give you lower electricity prices if you let us compete against each other. And that was when ERCOT was formed, because you needed somebody to be the air traffic controller to decide where the power is coming and going and how people get paid. ERCOT is a nonprofit. It's run by the state. It reports ultimately to the governor. But it's an air traffic controller for all these private companies. And it decides, whose electricity, what generator we buy electricity from. It decides who gets to own the transmission, like CenterPoint's a transmission provider. And then it decides, what retail electric providers can do.
And who are the people on that board? Do they know anything about electricity and so forth? Are these or are they more like academics? I mean, who's on that board?
Well, they're all appointed by, the ERCOT board is appointed by the PUC. The PUC is appointed by the governor. It is a mixture of political people, subject matter experts. There are supposed to be consumer advocates on these boards. But ultimately, they serve at the pleasure of the governor. And in CenterPoint's case, it is the PUC that oversees CenterPoint, because over the years, the Texas legislature has taken away the city of Houston's power. They've taken away Harris County government and all the local municipal services. Those have all lost their ability to control CenterPoint, as the legislature has taken that authority and given it to the PUC. So if you want CenterPoint to have to meet certain standards, if you want CenterPoint to have guardrails so that there's a limit to how much damage Houston should suffer in a Category 1 hurricane, that falls on the PUC, and that ultimately falls on the governor.
Well, it seems to me, how else? I mean, they got a sweet deal, because like at our firm, we have to, earn our stripes every day. I mean, there's no such thing as a guaranteed return. I mean, we gotta win, or we gotta outperform, or we're out of business. They don't have that. They don't have that kind of pressure. They got a sweet deal because they, in many ways, have socialized the risk, but they privatize the profits or the payroll of everybody. It just doesn't make sense. How can we undo this labyrinth of this whole? I mean, I'm sure now there's so many interest groups that have an interest in this whole thing, staying the same way. But what could people do to sort of say, we want to change this whole thing back?
I have no problem guaranteeing CenterPoint a profit, because we can't have 2, 3, 4, 5 different companies all trying to string transmission and distribution wires to people's houses, right? We can't have 5 different companies putting up 5 different poles on every street corner, right? We need, we have to choose one company and say, okay, you've got the contract. You're going to get this profit for delivering this contract. What is missing are standards, performance standards. What's missing is accountability. The PUC, the Texas Consumers Association says that CenterPoint has been overcharging its customers $100 million a year. They've got the receipts. They've filed the paperwork with PUC, and they're demanding that the PUC claw back that $100 million a year that CenterPoint's been overpaid.
Well, we know where it's going.
It's going to these boards of directors.
Yeah, and the management. Some of these guys are. Mr. David Lesser made $37 million just in 2021, 13 and 22, 16 and 23.
And let's point out, David Lesser is the one who got us into the $800 million generator contract that he negotiated with the woman that he was hanging out with.
Mm-hmm. And what did we get for that money other than generators we couldn't use?
Well,
and there were some members of the legislature, I think Carol Alvarado was one of them, who signed off on doing it.
Oh, yeah, because that was the cozy relationship.
Yeah.
Was, our lawmakers have been relying on this company for donations and favors for so long that when a CenterPoint lobbyist shows up, they get what they want.
It's like Santa Claus coming to town.
It's the accountability piece.
Yep.
It's the accountability piece.
Well, is it such a thing to say something like this? You have to be able to, I'm just making this up. If a storm is brewing within, 500 miles of Houston, you have to already bring in 3,000 linemen ready to put up the trees. You got to cut down so many trees per year. You've got to have, I'm just making this up, 80% of Houston back within 24 hours online, back on the grid. And then an acceptable amount is 2% in 2 days. I mean, is that the type of standards we could put in?
Yeah, Florida did it.
Is that right?
Florida did it.
What did they do?
Florida's got amazing regulations for how the utilities there have to respond to a storm. And the most important piece is putting up the right kind of poles, burying power lines where it makes sense, stringing them above the trees where that makes sense, and making sure you have the right kind of wire and the right kind of poles. Florida set those standards after Hurricane Andrew.
When was that again? When was that?
Oh, that was in the 1990s.
Wow.
And when a Category 1 storm hit Florida a couple of months ago, I think it was in July, everyone was restored within 36 hours.
Wow.
Within 36 hours, the same strength storm, but no one, they had something like 75% of people restored within 24 hours.
I mean,
it was an amazing response.
That seems so reasonable to say, and I just made it up. So much by day one, so much, and make them, save them from themselves. So make them do certain prep. Got to cut down more trees. You got, as soon as a storm is out there, as you said, it's predictable, or at least somewhat predictable. You see it's there. It could go somewhere else, like Louisiana, but it could come here. But it's there. Start getting those linemen ready in case we need them, and make those logistics ready. I mean, all that seems so rational to me.
Yeah. Well, if we had done that, we would not have suffered like we did during Beryl.
Well, my view is it's time we do something different because it's just not working. And soon it's going to be, I forgot which our caller that said they're thinking of leaving Houston. Think about that. There's probably thousands of people who are saying, I've had enough of this.
Well, more importantly, there are companies that will not relocate to Houston because we have an unreliable grid.
That's a very good point. How much is it costing us that people won't come here because they're like, we can't put up with that? Is it Houston worse, or are we unique versus Dallas or Austin, or is it like we're all in the same boat because we're Texas?
We're all in the same boat. I mean, if you look at what happened with, Austin Energy and the ice storm, you look at what some thunderstorms did up in Dallas, they're, everywhere the weather's getting worse.
Mm-hmm.
The weather's getting more extreme because of climate change. And, we haven't even started talking about fires yet. What California's going through with fire, climate change is real. It's changing the weather, and it's making everything much more expensive. It requires greater preparation. And, frankly, this is why all the insurance companies are pulling out of Houston,
Mhm.
the home insurance companies, is because they can see what's coming, and they can't afford to insure against it anymore.
God, what's going to happen? The government's going to have to do insurance because we've got to have it. So they're going to have to do something like windstorm.
Yeah,
Is it-
like
yeah,
Texas windstorm.
That's right, because they're going to have to do it
insurance,
because
yeah.
no one else will do it.
Yeah.
Because it's not practical, and the only way to make it practical is to have much higher premiums. And
Well,
they're just
or to
saying not to do it.
fortify our homes, right? Have higher building standards. We
Mhm.
haven't raised the building standards in Texas in a decade.
No kidding.
We need better, the higher building codes. When you talk about the high electricity bills, that we have to have better insulation, better weatherization, better energy conservation is really the answer. And, a not so small investment up front will save you an enormous amount of money in the long run. It's just difficult because the people in power in Texas do not want to spend that money up front to save money in the long run.
Wow. So it's short-sighted. 100%.
Very short-sighted.
Well, it seems to me, I know we're running out of time already, if you can believe that. If you had a magic wand, what would you do? Number one, building codes.
Oh, absolutely.
Number two, make it more accountable and have some sort of standards. It seems like number three, of course, our favorite, cut trees. So what else are we missing? Is there anything else?
Recognizing, I keep hammering on this because it's so important, because our state leaders try to tell us that climate change isn't real. And we know where the climate's going. We know it's going to be hotter. We know the storms are going to be worse. So when we update the building codes, when we fortify houses, when we, replace all of the resistance, electrical heating that is in Texas homes, that is why we had such horrible blackouts during Winter Storm Uri. We have to prepare for the future, not think about the past.
And what is the argument when you hear people say, oh, there's no climate change? Is it just the old fashioned, oh, it's just not true? Or is there any science that they're saying, oh, no, this is just temporary, or this last 100 years?
No, there's no scientific basis for rejecting climate change, only an economic basis. And it's that people don't want to spend the money to prepare for the future. And if we don't prepare, though, it's going to happen to us anyway. And it's going to cost us more in the long run.
Oh, not only in money, but probably in lives.
Absolutely.
And time and effort and misery and all those things. I know we have 2 minutes. 2 minutes. It's unbelievable how an hour goes like this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I just can't believe it. Your story is amazing. It really is. I'm not just saying it because I'm friends with you now. It just is. If you had to say something to Houston, look at the camera and tell them what you want to tell them. I mean, obviously you live here and I live here, and we love it here, despite all the warts, despite all the power problems and the flooding and everything. I mean, this is our home. And so I guess one thing I would tell Houston is, Houston, let's not give up on Houston. In fact, let's reinvest more in Houston with our lives, our children, our resources, because this is a special place. It's a great place. And we're going to get through this. You know how we're going to get through it? Together. And that's why make sure you vote. Everybody vote. Because Chris has brought up a lot of great points. And whether you're this side or that side, at the end of the day, hold these elected officials accountable and find out from them. Have you been going to the pond? Are you doing that? What role did you play in all of this? I want to know, because you know what? Maybe I'll think differently of you because maybe, I like to be with you. And yes, we give you awards, this and that, but you're really not serving me. And that's the whole point. They got to serve you. It's all you now.
Oh, Houston is resilient. There are amazing people, amazing skills here. But change is tyrannical. It doesn't stop. It's not going to bend to our will. We have to prepare for what it's going to bring us. And so, think about the future, not the past.
Give us your website again, or your email and everything. If people want to reach you, how do they do that?
Okay, so HoustonChronicle.com is the website. You can find me there. Tomlinson's Take is my newsletter, and sign up. And I have a question of the week to ask what my readers are thinking about, and a reading list, and all kinds of good stuff. So, yeah, but HoustonChronicle.com is where to find me.
There you go. Houston, you heard it here first. This is Gilbert Garcia. Don't forget, we're going to have let's see here. Councilmember Ramirez coming on. We have Georgia Provost. We have Carsha Jackson. I mean, listen, we have a lot of good shows coming up. But this is Gilbert Garcia saying we will see you next time. And streaming live on kwwj.org. Listen on the legendary KYOK 1140 AM and streaming live on kyokradio.org. KCOH 1230 AM, The Source. On Sand Geek Radio 95.1 FM 1460 AM. And Aliento Radio 101.7 FM and 1540 AM. Call in at 832-570-8075 and follow me on social media. See you then.